4 sand-colored police trucks rolled up the dusty road like they were hunting something dangerous. Sirens off, but lights flashing. Tires chewed up the gravel. Doors creaked open. Boots hit the ground. Hands hovered near guns. To anyone watching, from the hillside, it would have looked like a raid, like something serious was going on. But there was no shootout. No cartel, no hostages, just a quiet patch of land owned by a woman who grew tomatoes and raised chickens. What those officers didn't know, what they weren't ready for, was that the land they were stepping onto had history in its roots. And the woman who stood on it? She wasn't afraid of men with radios and mirrored glasses. She was the kind of woman people tried to overlook but couldn't forget. Skin like rich soil, hair wrapped in a sun-faded scarf, eyes that had seen too much but still watched everything. She was a mother, a farmer, a fighter, though you wouldn't know it by her soft tone. Her small farm sat on the outskirts of Eastern Highlands Province, where the red earth met scrub grass and half-paved. Roads. The land wasn't rich, but it was hers, passed down from her grandfather who'd once raised goats and sweet sorghum right here before the rains changed and the neighbors changed, and the silence around her grew louder every year. Jolie worked the land with cracked hands and tired knees. Morning to dusk, she grew tomatoes, yams, and collard greens. Not much, but enough to trade at the market. She filed every form herself, fought for every seed grant the district offered, even if they only ever answered. When someone was watching, the air smelled like wet bark and rust. Jolie was crouched behind the chicken shed, knee-deep in damp soil, trying to repair a cracked water pipe with a wrench older than her youngest son. Her palms were slick with mud. Sweat clung to her temples. Beside her, her cell phone buzzed once, then fell silent. Screen down in the dirt. She didn't check it. Didn't need to. Out here, time moved slow, and no one called unless something was broken. Leo's laughter echoed through the field. He was sprinting barefoot across the grass, chasing after a rogue hen with a stick in one hand and a broken toy truck in the other. His shirt was inside out, and he'd lost one sock hours ago. But his joy was full. Inside the small farmhouse, Edward sat curled up in a sun-warmed corner with his tablet. The school app was open, but minimized. He was really watching videos, earbuds in, trying to drown out the world. Jolie didn't have the strength to argue with him today. Then, the sound. Tires crunching gravel. She froze. Not the usual slow roll of a delivery bike, not the beat-up truck from the co-op. This was heavy, sharp, official. She stood quickly, brushing soil from her skirt. Her eyes narrowed as 2 massive khaki patrol vehicles rolled through the gate without so much as a honk. Government trucks. The kind that looked more at home storming a rebel hideout than pulling up to a vegetable patch. Her pulse stumbled. She wasn't expecting visitors, and certainly not ones wearing bulletproof vests. The wrench dropped from her hand. She walked around the shed slowly, careful not to look startled, careful to look harmless. 2 officers stepped out. The first was tall and pale, with silver sunglasses that mirrored everything but revealed nothing. The second was shorter, broad-shouldered, young, maybe in his 30s, with warm brown skin, a clenched jaw, and nervous fingers that tapped near his belt like a ticking clock. Neither smiled. Jolie kept her voice steady. "Can I help?" "You?" The tall one didn't answer at first. Then flatly, "We got a report. Tip says stolen goods might be on the property. We need to have a look." She frowned. "Stolen from where?" "Can't say. The tip came through anonymously." She let that hang in the air for a moment. "Do you have a warrant?" she asked. The younger officer shifted awkwardly. "Shouldn't take long. Just a routine check." Jolie took 1 step forward, then crossed her arms. "No paper. No search. That's the law." The tall one stared at her for a beat, then turned slightly to glance at the house, then the barn, then back at her. Something in his stance changed. Not aggressive. Just certain, like a man used to getting his way. "We can always get a warrant," he said. Jolie didn't flinch. "Then go get one." They didn't leave. They radioed in, made hushed calls, whispered to each other as if she wasn't. Standing 5 feet away in her own yard, Jolie could feel it, the tension. It pressed against her ribs like a weight. Not panic, not yet, but something close, something old and familiar. The screen door creaked behind her. Edward peeked out. "Ma, what's happening?" She didn't turn. "Inside, now." But the officers noticed. "How many people are inside, ma'am?" the young officer asked. "Just my son," she replied. "Anyone else?" "No, just making sure everyone's safe." "Safe from what?" she snapped. That silence again, not a calm one, the kind that swallows noise before something explodes. More vehicles arrived, 1, then 2. By the time the 4th pulled up, Jolie's yard looked like a checkpoint. Officers walked the perimeter, checked tools, lifted tarps, pointed at the shed like it might bite. Something was wrong. Deeper than the so-called tip. Deeper than the rusted engine blocks and abandoned scrap metal she used for parts. It was the way they looked at her home, like it was lying. The way they looked at her, like she was. The young officer paused, hand settling near his belt like a threat made of habit. "Ma'am," he said, voice even but firm. "If you just cooperate, this'll all go much smoother." Jolie laughed, once, but there was no joy in it. It was short, dry, and cut sharper than a blade. "Cooperate," she repeated. "I'm not the one showing up at someone's home over whispers and shadows without a single piece of paper to back it up." Behind her, the door creaked open again. Edward stepped out slowly, this time more careful. His hand wasn't empty. He held his phone in front of him, camera lens aimed directly at the scene, recording, streaming, making witnesses out of everyone. Jolie saw the phone, gave him a tiny nod. She didn't stop him, not this time. Because she knew the only armor they had was evidence. The officer marched toward her again, his boots hitting the gravel with weight and purpose. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, like the question was a warning. "Not yet," he replied, chin lifted. "But there will be if you try that door one more time." The officer tilted his head, tone shifting. "You're being difficult." She took a deep breath, slow, steady. Her chest barely moved. "No," she said. "I'm being a citizen, one who knows her rights." He didn't like that. He stepped in, closer than he needed to be. Breathing, distance now. "You hiding something, Jolie?" Her jaw clenched tight. "Just my patience." They stared at each other, neither blinking. Behind her, Edward's voice rose just enough for the others to hear. "I'm live right now," he said. "Whole school's watching." The younger officer looked rattled. His eyes jumped between Jolie and the lens of Edward's phone. He rubbed the back of his neck. His stance shifted, less certain now, less sure. But the tall one, he didn't move. His grip only tightened. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "Just following up on a report." Jolie didn't answer. She lifted her hand and pointed behind her, toward the sagging shed where the goats used to sleep. "You'll look there," she said, "and only from outside the fence." The group of officers paused, exchanged glances. Then the tall one muttered something low under his breath, waved his hand, and the others began to move. They spread out like hunters, circling the barn and the shed, snapping photos with their phones. One of them leaned over her broken tractor like he expected to find a stolen treasure beneath the rust. Edward stepped up beside her. His phone never wavered. "Is this even allowed?" he whispered. Jolie's hands were trembling now, but she kept them at her sides, fingers curled inward. "They want a reaction," she said, voice soft. Don't give them one. They think we don't know better, Edward said bitterly. They think we're alone. At the edge of the fence, Leo had stopped pretending to play. He stood barefoot and wide-eyed, mud on his toes, his little toy truck dangling from one hand. The moment had reached him, too. He jogged over, small feet thumping the earth. Mama, he said, voice unsure. Who are they? Jolie turned fast, dropped to one knee. Baby, go inside, she said gently but firmly. Leo hesitated, looking over her shoulder at the strangers in uniforms. Then he turned and walked briskly to the house. Edward reached out and helped guide his little brother through the doorway. Jolie rose again, just in time to hear shouting. From behind the barn. Over here! Found something! Her head whipped around. What is it? She called. The younger officer jogged to the back, waving for the others. They crowded around something covered in a weather-worn blue tarp, ripped and sun-bleached, half-buried beneath spare tires and rusted poles. One of the men tugged the tarp away with a flourish, like uncovering evidence. It was scrap, coiled metal wire, bits of broken piping. A rusted-out engine from an old off-road bike that hadn't run in half a decade. This look familiar? One officer shouted. Jolie walked toward them, her face pinched in confusion. Yes, she said slowly. That's mine. It's junk. Been there since before I moved in. It came with the land. The officer nodded. But the way he did it said he didn't believe a word. Strange, he muttered. We had a report about missing utility panels. This looks like construction site scrap. Her voice dropped, flat and cold. That's not what it is. He pulled out his phone, started taking photos. Snap, snap, snap. Jolie felt it rising inside her, but it wasn't anger. It was something colder, like shame that didn't belong to her, like the fear that facts didn't matter here, only what they could twist into a story. They're trying to make something stick, she whispered. She turned her head and saw them, the audience. Across the road, old lady Eleanor was standing on her porch, arms folded across her chest. Two teenagers she didn't recognize had their phones raised from behind a clump of sunflowers. And near the edge of the long dirt road, a pickup truck sat parked under a dusty marula tree. Its driver stared straight ahead, pretending to check a mirror. But he hadn't moved in 20 minutes. He wasn't watching, but he wasn't leaving either. Jolie's life, her soil, her family, her quiet fight for dignity, was now the center of a show she didn't audition for. The officers were trying to make her look like the villain. And the world? It was watching. Jolie's life was being flipped inside out. Her house, her name, her land, all dragged into the open, held up for judgment. And half the province had front-row seats. She could feel the weight of it, the camera lenses, the whispers, the silence of people who wouldn't speak but wouldn't look away either. One officer began walking toward the porch again, boots steady, and head down like he didn't even hear her the first 3 times. Jolie snapped. I told you! She shouted. You are not going into my house. He didn't slow. Hey! She barked, voice cutting the air now. This is harassment. You don't get to... And then, over the low crackle of radios and murmuring wind, a different sound broke through. A voice. Calm. Low. Steady. I think someone here needs to explain what exactly you're doing on my sister's land. Every officer turned. Jolie turned too, and then she froze. At the edge of the gravel drive, tall against the sky, stood a figure she hadn't seen in over a year, but knew in an instant. Asher Brooks, her brother. Boots dusty from travel, a duffel bag slung casually over his shoulder. His face unreadable, his eyes sharp. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The way he stood, quiet, rooted, unshaken, shifted the very air around him. The police didn't know who he was. Not yet. And that made all the difference. Asher. didn't move. He simply stood there, gaze sweeping over each badge one by one, like he was weighing them, measuring. Jolie's throat tightened. Last she heard, he'd been deployed, first to Mali, then Germany, then nothing. Just silence. And now here he was, dropped into the storm at the exact moment she needed him most. The tall officer stepped forward cautiously, trying to size him up. "Sir, this is an active investigation. We're responding to a tip." Asher didn't blink. "Is that so?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like intimidation." "You have a warrant?" The officer hesitated. "Do you live here?" "No," Asher said. "But she does. That's my sister, and I've got questions." Silence. He stepped forward deliberately and let the duffel bag fall onto the porch with a thud. "You got a warrant?" he asked again. No one answered. "Then you're trespassing." The younger officer shifted awkwardly now, voice smaller than before. "We got a tip about stolen construction materials. We're just trying to follow up." Asher tilted his head slightly. "Show me the paperwork." We're still waiting for a judge to approve it." "Then you wait in your trucks." Jolie stood completely still, hardly breathing. The shift was happening. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was powerful, like a storm that decides to change direction. It wasn't about anger. It was posture, presence, command. Asher didn't need to explain who he was. It was already clear. But the officers didn't like it. The tall one stepped closer again, stiff. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to step back so we can continue doing our job." Asher smiled, just once. A slow, quiet smile, not kind, not warm, controlled. "You know what happens when someone like me comes home," he said, "and finds uniforms surrounding his sister without cause?" He took a step forward. "We don't step back. We step in." That's when the younger officer cracked. His eyes widened. Recognition hit like a slap. "Wait, Asher Brooks?" he said. "Staff Sergeant Doob?" Asher nodded once. The young man's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes dropped. The taller officer turned, confused. "You know him?" "Yeah," the deputy said under his breath. "He's kind of a legend." Jolie exhaled, slow and careful. The neighbors who'd been watching from doorways and window slits stepped a little closer now. Not too obvious, but they wanted to see. One man with a phone ducked behind his mailbox. A woman down the lane drove by again, second time in 10 minutes, rolling slow like she'd lost something on the road. It was a show now. Her life, her farm, her children, all turned into a spectacle because someone, somewhere, didn't like how she looked while growing her vegetables. Jolie turned to her brother. "You couldn't have picked a better time." His eyes never left the officers. "Didn't like the way you sounded on the phone last month? Figured I'd check for myself." One officer peeled away first, then another. The group started retreating slowly toward their trucks. Radios crackled, but the certainty in their movements was gone. Now, there was hesitation. But Asher wasn't finished. He looked at the cluster of uniforms still hovering near the shed. "You mean to tell me a black woman growing tomatoes and raising 2 boys is worth 4 patrol units and—" He paused, then looked upward. A faint buzz. Jolie followed his gaze. A drone, just visible in the pale sky, hovered silently above the field. Surveillance. She hadn't even noticed it before. The tall officer cleared his throat. "We'll be on our way." Asher tilted his head. "Not yet." The man stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You're going to file a report," Asher said, "and we want the case number." "In writing. Before you leave." Another pause. A long one. Then, reluctantly, the officer radioed it in. A few minutes later, a small slip of paper was handed over. Asher folded it without reading it. Only then did he nod. Now you can leave. Engines turned, gravel shifted, doors slammed, and one by one the trucks pulled away, slow, silent, no apology. Jolie stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes forward until the last vehicle disappeared down the road. She didn't say a word, but her brother was still beside her. And now, finally, she didn't feel alone. Here's the rewritten and expanded version of the aftermath scene. Quiet, emotional, and powerful, continuing right after the police leave and the dust settles. A few minutes later, one of the officers returned with a small printed slip, thin and wrinkled, like it meant nothing. Asher took it without a word, folded it in half, and slid it into his pocket like a receipt he didn't ask for. Only then did he turn toward the line of trucks. "You can leave now," he said flatly. Engines hummed back to life. Tires crunched the gravel like dry bones breaking. One by one, the patrol vehicles turned around and drove away. Slow, quiet, like they were sneaking out of their own shame. No sirens, no apology, just dust in the air. Jolie stood on the porch, arms crossed tight, watching until the last set of taillights vanished down the road. She didn't speak. Neither did Thabiso. Inside, the silence was almost louder. A noise came from the kitchen, a choked sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Edward. For the first time that day, Jolie realized how terrified her boys had been. Leo had gone upstairs without saying a word, probably buried under his blanket like he did during thunderstorms. His toy truck lay forgotten on the floor, one wheel cracked. Edward stood by the table, phone still in hand, the screen black now. He wasn't filming anymore. He just stared at the door, like he was waiting for it to swing open again. Jolie shut it slowly. The lock clicked with a finality that felt like a sigh. Asher placed his duffel bag gently by the wall, then turned to her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm fine." He raised an eyebrow. "No, you're not." She let out a shaky breath and leaned against the counter, arms limp now. "It's always like this out here," she said. "Little things, all the time. Someone calls code enforcement because the grass is too long. The county does random checks on the shed. A flat tire gets reported like I'm abandoning vehicles." She shook her head. But this? 4 patrol cars. Guns. They were going to walk right into my home, with my children inside. Asher looked around the kitchen. Same faded blue wallpaper from their childhood. Same shelves their father built with cracked knuckles and a bent-back saw. But today, the room felt heavier. "You're on their radar now," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything." "You don't have to." Jolie covered her face with both hands. Her voice broke. "I'm trying to be so. I swear I am. I'm handling the books myself, filing forms, applying for seed grants. I even called the soil rehab office in Greenridge 3 times last month. But no one answers unless there's a journalist watching." She dropped her hands, eyes glassy. "Out here, I'm just that black woman on the old doob land." Asher didn't speak right away. He pulled out a chair, sat down slow, like they were back in their mother's house arguing about curfews again. "You remember that year I came home from basic?" he said, "and the old truck wouldn't start?" She looked up, frowning. "Yeah?" "I was in uniform standing in the driveway, and some guy from up the road walked by. Didn't even ask who I was, just said, 'Did they hire you to clean the gutters?' Told me he thought the family had moved out." Jolie rubbed her temples. "Of course I remember. I wanted to punch that man right through the fence. But I didn't let you." "No, you told me not to. Said if I did, the story wouldn't be about a rude neighbor. It would be about a violent woman. That's how it works." Edward finally spoke. "Still works that way." Asher turned to him. You all right? Edward nodded slowly. I think so. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to yell at them, but... He looked down at his phone. I figured filming was safer, Asher. Gave him a firm nod of approval. It was. Edward stared at the table. I kept thinking, what if they'd come inside? What if they thought I was reaching for something? I had a spoon in my hand, Uncle. Just a spoon. Jolie's breath caught in her throat. She looked at her son like she was seeing him again for the first time today. Tabiso leaned back. That's why I came. I didn't trust it. Something in my gut felt wrong. You didn't call, she said softly. Didn't want to give you time to tell me not to come. That made her laugh, tired and cracked. I've got 30 days. Before I report back, he added. Might as well spend them fixing whatever they broke. Jolie's eyes shimmered again. They didn't break anything. He gave her a look. She looked away. Okay. Maybe they cracked something. He stood, walked toward the sink, and glanced out the window. The street was empty now. No cameras, no slow-moving cars, no watchers. The show's over, he said. I know you don't want to make noise, he added, but Jolie, you're not invisible. They're just testing how far they can push. She leaned her head against the fridge. What am I supposed to do? Sue the police? Call a reporter? Sometimes that makes things worse. Sometimes silence does too. He looked around the kitchen once more. You keep Papa's tools? She nodded. In the barn? What's left of it? A small smile tugged at his mouth. Might check them out tomorrow. Feels good to fix things with your hands. They sat with the silence a while. Then Edward asked, Uncle, were you scared when you saw them here? Asher didn't answer right away. No, he said at last. I was angry. Edward blinked. But you didn't yell. Asher looked at him gently. I didn't need to. He leaned forward a little, voice low but steady, like passing down something ancient. Real strength doesn't come from shouting. It comes from knowing who you are and making sure they don't forget it. Across the room, Jolie looked up at him. Her eyes glistened, but not from grief. Something else had settled in her, something firmer than rage, steadier than fear. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to, because in that quiet space, between the cracked wallpaper and the dust-softened light, she remembered. She remembered. She wasn't just surviving out here. She was standing, and for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough. I don't think I have that kind of strength left. Jolie's voice barely rose above a whisper. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes, clouded from the day, stared at nothing. Asher walked over, calm and sure. He placed a hand on her shoulder, warm and steady. You do, he said. You just forgot. That's why I'm here. But outside, something still felt off. His gaze moved to the front window. A black pickup truck crawled by, slow as a shadow slipping, across the grass. It wasn't the first time he'd seen it. Third, actually. Same truck. Same tinted windows. No plates. It coasted past the house like a jackal circling a chicken coop. You know that one? He asked. Jolie came up behind him and squinted through the glass. No, it's been doing that since last week. You tell anyone? She shook her head. I thought it was just someone from the farmer's co-op, or a neighbor. Didn't want to cause trouble. Asher turned toward her, face sharper now. People who mean no harm. Don't drive laps around your house like predators. He crossed the room, opened his duffel, and pulled out a small, worn black notebook. Under it, a sleek black case. Jolie crossed her arms, uneasy. Please tell me you're not pulling out. A gun. It's legal, locked, registered, he replied, not opening it. And it's not for walking around. It's for not sitting still when people try to scare you. Edward, sitting stiff on the couch, whispered, "You think they'll come back?" Asher shut the case firmly. "Not tonight. They like sunlight. They like an audience." Jolie pressed her fingers to her forehead. "This can't be my life. I grow lettuce. I raise 2 kids. That's it. No one does this to the families on the other end of this road." "They did this," Asher said, "because they figured you were alone." Then, 3 hard knocks at the door, the kind that silenced a room. Everyone froze. Asher raised a hand toward Edward. "Don't move. Don't touch anything." Jolie crept to the door and peered through the peephole. Her eyebrows furrowed. It was the young officer from earlier. Alone. She unlocked the chain, but kept the door just cracked. "What?" He looked out of place, hat in hand, like a child caught lying. "I came back alone. Off the record." "That sounds like a mistake," she said. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." She didn't answer. He cleared his throat. "I've only been on the force 2 years. Out here they treat anonymous tips like gospel, easier than real work. They told us this place was high risk. Said to expect someone armed." Her eyes narrowed. "Someone black, you mean?" He looked like he wanted to deny it, but couldn't. Asher appeared behind her, arms crossed. "So what now? You hand her an apology and walk away clean?" The officer took a breath. "No, I just wanted to be human about it." Jolie slowly unlatched the door. "You want to help?" she said. "Then write something. Tell me who made that call." He shook his head. "Anonymous tip lines. Protected." "Of course they are," Asher muttered. The officer looked up. "You really are him, huh?" Asher didn't respond. "I read about Romani. You pulled 2 soldiers out under fire, took one in the leg." Asher gave a dry laugh. "Now I'm here guarding tomato beds." The officer didn't know what to say. Jolie stepped in. "Listen, you seem decent, but next time, don't come with guns unless you've got proof. Not just because of who I am, but because there are kids here." He nodded. "I understand. Do you?" "I'm trying to." She closed the door slowly. Inside, she leaned against it, a long breath leaving her body like it had been waiting all day. Asher walked past her into the kitchen, poured a glass of water. Edward looked over. "Will they come back?" he asked. "Maybe," Asher replied. "And then what?" Jolie said, joining him. He handed her the glass. "Then we record. We report. We call the press. You've got a right to live, to grow, to raise your boys without fear." She looked at him. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said, "but it's not impossible either." That night, Asher sat on the porch, dogs at his feet, a bat resting quietly across his lap. Jolie joined him, wrapping herself in a blanket as the wind moved gently through the tall grass. The moon hung low, gold and full. She glanced sideways. "You think Dad would have known what to do?" Asher shook his head. "No, but he would have stood in front of them if they tried anything, just like you did." She smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I did." Out in the field, the breeze danced softly across the soil, and for the first time in a long time, Jolie felt something she'd nearly forgotten. Not safety, not peace, but not alone. And that made all the difference. Sometimes, the strongest resistance isn't loud, it's steady. It's a mother standing her ground, a brother showing up, a child choosing to witness instead of fear. In a world that tries to erase or intimidate, quiet courage is a form of protest. And no one deserves to fight alone. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful tales of strength, justice, and family. And remember, sometimes the strongest voice is the one that simply refuses to disappear.